Okay, let's go ahead and get this meeting of Templeton Community Services District Board of Directors started. Today is June 16th at 6:30 p.m. Go ahead and roll call, please.
Director Spardonish,
Here.
Logan,
Here.
Mortensen,
Here.
Peterson,
Here.
and Tyrone.
Okay. Everyone's here. We have the quorum, so we'll get going. Let's everyone please stand for Pledge of Allegiance. Okay, ready, begin.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Great, please have a seat. Order of business, do any of the board members would like to change the order of business? Okay. Special reports and or presentations, we already have the CHP report that was sent to us. And then so we have the sheriff here. Hi, how are you?
Hi, good. Good evening, Sandra Raza from Sheriff's Office here in Templeton. Stats for last month are as follows. We have to date 345 calls for service, where at this time last year we had 379. A total of 50 reports, where last year we had 48. We had a report for assault and battery. We took 2 for disturbance calls, but we did have a total of 19 calls. 2 calls for service for burglary, 2 reports were taken, 1 call for theft, 1 report was taken. Trespassing, we had 4 calls, no reports taken, 1 for vandalism, no reports taken. And we had 3 calls for scams, 1 report was taken, 17 for suspicious circumstances, 3 reports taken. The only thing I have to add is that we are planning ahead and planning to up staff and make sure we'll have enough personnel for the 4th. So we're just planning early and trying to make sure that all our jurisdictions are covered, you know, because we have San Miguel, which was really busy for us last year. So yeah, we're just planning ahead. If anybody has any questions for me.
Any questions? Do you know, I guess, are we going to discuss the 4th of July for the drone program? Or do you know if you guys gonna have drones here?
So yes, we will have, I'm told we'll be able to put 2 drones up. But remember, we have 3 stations. So meaning we have South Station, Coast Station, and here North Station. So 95% positive one of the drones will come up here. And then it's just gonna be a matter of, you know, where's the demand, so we can appropriately try to, because we need drone operators, you know, they need to have like a spotter and all that good stuff, but we should have one for the 4th here at.
Okay, perfect. Thank you very much.
No problem.
Any questions from public for the commander? No? Okay, all right. Well, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Okay, wow, you're here. Perfect, thank you. School district.
Hi, I'm Jenny Greninger, Templeton Unified School District. So I'll be reporting to you on 2 meetings since I was here last. The first is from May 28th. We had a presentation from 805 Games and our special ed department. 805 Games is Special Olympics. And so we had the students from our district that participated in that. They had a video showing well, how much fun they had and how enriching it was. It was a really heartwarming presentation. We had the May budget revision, and we're seeing a 2.87% cost of living adjustment from the state, with a possible additional 1.44% that is not guaranteed, and it would be restricted if it's given. So we're waiting to hear back on information from that. We are in the middle of forming a policy on artificial intelligence, and California School Board Association has provided a sample policy. It's very generic, though. We felt like it would not really cover very much. And so we are trying to make some adjustments to that that's more specific to our district. We had an AI symposium about a month ago, I think, maybe. And we started with the day with having some kids grades 5 through 12 that came and spent the morning discussing concerns and going through exercises to help us come up with a policy. And then we did those same exercises and repeated that whole thing the second half of the day with community members, parents, and teachers. And surprisingly, the kids wanted more restrictions on AI than the adults anticipated. So I'm really hoping that we listen to that as we form that policy. Snap Mobile made a donation of $10,223.75 to Templeton Middle School Wrestling. And the Ag Swine Barn is set to be dedicated to Jerry Clark, who's a ag teacher that passed away. The ceremony for that's going to be on June 20th at 1 p.m. We have projects starting to get approved, such as painting of various buildings, slurry seal of all of our parking lots, geotechnical engineering and soil corrosivity testing, to name just a few. Not all of those are using Measure D funds, but we are starting to see quite a bit of work getting started. Then on June 11th, we introduced and appointed our new high school principal. His name is Dave Hawley. And he is coming to us from, he was the assistant principal at Atascadero High School. That went great. And then we also recognized for her service, Annabelle Borges, who is our student trustee. It was her last meeting on June 11th. We had a presentation from the Templeton Library Association on the topics I'm sure you're all well aware of. So, you know, it was interesting to hear the long journey that they've gone through trying to get some approval of Templeton tax money coming back to our own library here. We did a review of the cell phone policy. It's been in place for a year now. So just to update everybody, there is a law now here in California from the governor that they're wanting all districts to have some kind of policy that either restricts or abandons cell phone usage at schools. And we were ahead of the game with that. We started talking about that before it was even brought up as a potential from the state. Did surveys with our teachers, our parents, and our students. And surprisingly, they were all very much in alignment with wanting some form of restrictions. What we ended up doing was for K through 8, they have their phones are to be completely turned off and away in their backpacks for the entire school day. Bell to bell, no cell phone. The high school has their phones off and away during instruction time, but they could have them out for passing period, lunch break, and other breaks. And so we reviewed that to see how it's going. The high school is the only school that we're seeing any kind of issues with, and really it's because they're able to take it out and use it so often that they're forgetting to turn it off, or they're kind of fudging the lines during instruction time. So we're still looking at that. One of the things we're talking about is removing passing period as a time for them to bring out their phones. Just they could have it for lunchtime and breaks, with the idea being our student trustee had mentioned, you know, lots of students have jobs or things happening after school that they're getting communication from, and they need to be able to check their phone at some point during the day. So they'll still have that ability. We did a draft budget review. Our attendance is still trending downwards, not a lot, but it is trending downwards. We received a donation from Jack Morton of $1,000 to Amber Long's classroom at Templeton Elementary School. And we did an approval of the roof replacement at the Templeton High School Ag Complex, as well as HVAC replacement at that same building, and approval of an EV charger project. None of those are Measure D items. Those are being funded with previous funds we had in place under you know, a line item for facilities improvement, and the approval of the EV charger project is funded by a grant. Okay, any questions?
Thank you. Any questions from the board? Any questions from the public? Great. Well, thank you very much. Appreciate it.
One thing I thought today is, we come here and give you a report, but you don't come to our board and give us a report. That would be a really great idea. So please, if you would consider that, it would be good.
Thank you. All right, let's go to the public comment. Members of the public may address the board on any items of interest within the subject matter jurisdiction of the board, but not on the agenda today. In compliance with the Brown Act, the board cannot discuss or act on items not on the agenda. Are there any public comment that's not on the agenda today? Okay, all right, let's go to the consent agenda. We have several items on our consent agenda. We have the minutes from May 19th, 2026, May 28th, 2026. We have the treasurer's report for April. We have the adoption of ordinance number 2026-2, which is to repeal incentivized water relinquishment program. We have resolution number 08-2026A, which is the consolidation of the district's biennial election, and resolution number 09-2026, adopting regulations for candidates. We also have the budget amendment, Volpe Lift Station. We have resolution number 13-2026, which is a CFD assessment amount. And we have resolution number 14-2026, which is I understand we need to pull two items, the item A and B for minutes, because we had some board members that were absent. Any other items that you would like to pull for discussion? No. Any items from public that they like to ask questions about on these items? No? Okay. I'll bring it back. I'll entertain a motion to approve items C, D, E, F, G, and H.
Make a motion to approve.
Okay, do I have a second?
I'll second.
All right, roll call, please.
Directors Mortensen,
Aye.
Logan,
Aye.
Peterson,
Yes.
Tyrone. Aye. And Fardonish.
Aye. Okay, for the minutes, I'll make a motion to approve, I think I'm gonna go ahead and do them separately because I think we had two board members missing each one. I'll make a motion to approve consent agenda item 7A for the board minutes for May 19th, 2026.
Second.
Okay, roll call, please.
Directors Fardonish,
Aye.
Tyrone. Aye. Logan,
Stay.
Mortensen,
Aye.
and Peterson.
Okay, and then I'll make a motion to approve the minutes from May 28th, 2026, which was the special meeting.
I'll second.
Okay, roll call, please.
Directors Fardonish,
Aye.
Tyrone. Aye. Logan,
Abstain.
Mortensen,
Aye.
and Peterson.
Abstain.
All items pass. Perfect. Thank you. Let's go to item 8A, which is our public hearing. This is resolution number 10-2026. It's our urban water management plan, and I see our engineer already up and ready to go. Go ahead, Lori.
Hi, good evening, everybody. The district engineer for Timberlake Community Services District. This item before you is the urban water management plan update for 2025. This plan is required for any districts or service providers over 3,000 service connections. So we've reached that as of 2022. And so there's a requirement for every 5 years to update the plan, which our first plan was adopted in 2023 for information up to 2022 for our water use. And now we've done an update. Online with us is our consultant, Owen Cubitt from Provost and Pritchard. If we have any questions on the plan itself, which is actually linked at the very end of your stock report. If you haven't had a chance to look at it, we have a public review draft that's been online since mid-May for any individuals that would like to look at it and had any questions on that. I haven't personally received any questions or comments. But some of the highlights are in that staff report. Basically, this document is a description of the district water supply, or estimated population growth or water demands, water reliability, and water conservation efforts projected through 2050. So we're looking ahead here 25 years. And so every 5 years it would bump 5 years further. So it's a long-term planning document. And the second item there, there's an evaluation of the state of California's 20% water reduction goal as it applies to the district. So we actually have met that goal, which was to limit water use to 190 gallons per capita per day, so per person per day. And based on the analysis of our consultants, we actually met that, and the average water use is 153 gallons per capita per day. So Templeton's doing a good job conserving water, which means that into the future, it's looking promising that our water supplies will be adequate. So the third item there, kind of speaking to any particular emergency, it looks like the measures that are documented in the updated water shortage contingency plan that's a part of this conclude that the district will typically not experience water shortages unless there is a catastrophic interruption of supply, which I think we had experienced that last year and will not likely experience something similar to that. So overall, a good report, and if you have any questions for myself or our consultants, feel free to let me know.
Great, thank you. Any questions for our engineer? Okay, any questions from public regarding this matter? Yes, go ahead.
Yeah, hello, Tyler English, resident here in Templeton. So your growth projections don't match up to any sort of regional projections that are going along right now? SLOCOG recently did a housing projection for the whole unincorporated communities, and the projections that are incorporated in this document don't seem to align. And so just wanted some clarification maybe with your consultant as to how our growth projections here in Templeton and its corresponding water needs were determined. It didn't seem clear in the document.
Owen, are you?
Yes, I'm here.
Owen?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Did you hear the question? Oh,
Yes.
okay.
The growth projections were based on a water and wastewater master plan that Templeton recently completed. And that included a population growth of 1.2% annually. And Templeton will eventually reach a build out in 2045 of about 10,150 people. And then at that point, there will be, no more capacity for growth. And that's what that was based on.
Is that good?
Clarification.
Okay, that answers the question. Okay, good. Any other questions on this matter? Okay, all right. We'll bring it back to the board for any further comments. Otherwise, I'll go ahead and entertain a motion for this item.
Go on.
Okay.
So you're closing the public hearing?
Yes.
Okay. I'll make a motion that the board approve resolution number 10-2026, the Urban Water Management Plan.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Director Peters.
Directors Logan,
Aye.
Peterson,
Yes.
Mortensen,
Aye.
Tyrone.
Aye.
And Fardonish.
Aye. Okay, motion passes 5-0. All right, next item is public hearing resolution number 11-2026. This is weed abatement. Chief Peterson, please go ahead.
Good evening, members of the board. So tonight before you is our annual weed abatement hearing. Staff is recommending that the board conduct a hearing to allow parties to protest any lots or addresses, that are in question. And at the conclusion of the hearing, adopt a resolution 11/2026 declaring the accumulation of weeds and debris as a public nuisance, allowing our weed abatement contractor to then remove those parcels and cut them. We had a total of 9 lots back in May 4th. For a little history, we went out and did our inspection. We gave you a report on that one. Came back, did a second one, and we only had 9 parcels that were out of compliance after the June date, and just went out again today, and there are actually 5 more that have cut, so there are actually only 4 out of compliance. We do have a couple of other parcels that have had some regrowth, so we plan on making some contacts with those folks and asking them to cut again. And report.
Okay, thank you. Any questions from the board? No, okay, I'll go to the public. Are there, open up this, public hearing. Are there any objection, questions, comments on this item?
Question.
Yes.
So there's a lot on the corner of Bennett and Vineyard that's fenced. I think it's on the west side of Vineyard that has, like, they mow it down, but there's a section in the middle that never gets mowed. And you can see there's some equipment there. There's some cement bags that got left out that now are not usable. But I don't know why that whole large area is not ever mowed. And we did have a fire there last year that was very concerning. Houses are very close to it, so.
Are you referring to the property on Duncan next to Trader Joe's there, or I mean on Bennett, sorry?
I don't know about a street named Duncan. It's right on the corner of Vineyard and Bennett,
Right.
or
So
not Bennett,
a fire?
Vineyard and Rossi.
Rossi, okay.
Yes.
So the fire, yeah. So that property, they do mow within compliance, and the hill right there is the only thing they don't take care of. So when they do a 50-foot perimeter on anything over an acre, that is typically in compliance.
Okay, any other questions, comments? Okay, I'll close the public hearing. I'll bring it back to the board for, I'll entertain a motion if there's no further comments.
I'll enter a motion that the board adopt and agree resolution number 11-26, the weed abatement.
Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Okay. Roll call, please.
Directors Tyrone.
Aye.
Logan.
Aye.
Mortensen.
Aye.
Peterson.
Yes.
And Prodonish.
Aye. Okay, motion passes 5-0. All right, next item is public hearing, AB 2561, report on status of vacancy in 2025. And that's you.
Sure, happy to pursue this item. A couple of years ago, a new state law was put into place, and it requires public agencies to hold a public hearing and accept comments on the status of vacancies for the prior calendar year, prior to considering the adoption of your next budget. And so this is the second year we've put this report together. Your packet contains a brief description of the law and then a listing of the various positions that had gone vacant. There are 6 positions that were vacant at one point during last calendar year, so 2025. And there's a listing of when the vacancy date started, when the replacement employee started, and when the status was at the end of the year. Happy to take any questions that you have on the report. It's for compliance purposes only.
Great, thank you. Any questions? Any questions from the public on this matter? I'll open, I guess it's a public hearing. I'll open it up to the public hearing. Oh, okay. I'll go ahead, close the public hearing, bring it back, and this is an action item, so I'll entertain a motion. Please.
I'll make a motion that the board accept the report on the status of vacancies in 2025 as required by AB 2561.
Great, thank you. Director Morrison, would you like second?
I'll second.
All right, roll call, please.
Directors Logan,
Aye.
Mortensen,
Aye.
Peterson,
Yes.
Tyrone. And Fardonich.
Aye. Okay, motion passes 5-0. Wow, another public hearing. Public hearing resolution number 12-2026, adoption of 2026-27 fiscal year budget and appropriations limit. General Manager. Oh,
Yes. I'm happy to present
Okay.
this item.
Okay.
Just this is another item that you deal with annually, the budget, the budget is for fiscal year 26-27. Just a little background, staff reviewed draft line item budgets with the admin and finance committee in late April. In late May, at your last special meeting, the board held a workshop and reviewed a nearly complete budget document. No, there was not direction to make any changes to the document as presented to you at that date. Last week, you were provided a complete copy of the budget. Now it is now complete. The only additional item that you didn't review previously is the transmittal letter, which is now included. There was one error that was discovered on the summary of fund balance page. That's page 8. That was replaced. It didn't affect any of the line item sheets. It was just an arithmetic error on that page. So that's been corrected. And then we've provided you updated line item detail sheets for all of the funds. However, none of the numbers changed, only the draft labeling was removed. The budget does include a across the board cost of living adjustment of 3.68% for all full-time positions and certain part-time positions tied to the full-time wage schedule. That was determined based on the latest calculation, the April over April calculation for the CPI. It also includes adjustments of 2.5% for 5 classifications that were determined to be more than 6.7% behind the district's goal, or more than 6.7% above 5% below median. If that made any sense. And one position where a 5% adjustment is recommended based on a position that was about 9.4% behind the 5% beyond median to the full-time wage schedule. Additionally, the budget includes the GAN calculation. It's for compliance purposes only, but it is reflected within it is included in the budget, and it also is called out in the resolution. I'm happy to go through any level of detail you would like if there are questions of the budget, but tonight we have noticed a public hearing. We would request you take any public comments about the budget. Following the public hearing, if there are any comments or concerns the board has, we'd be happy to address those.
Great, thank you. Thank you for this, and I just want to thank, just like General Manager has mentioned in his report, thank Natalie Clark for doing all the hard work, spending hours and hours. So really appreciate it. You do this, the audit, everything. So you do it year after year. So we really appreciate it. Thank you. I'll bring it to the board for any questions or comments. I know we had a workshop, so everything was pretty much discussed in detail. So if are there any further questions or comments?
No, although I was not present at both of those meetings,
But
I
you were at
did
the
watch it
finance.
online.
Oh, great.
And of course, being part of the finance
Finance,
committee, I had reviewed the
Yeah.
budget prior to it being
Exactly.
presented to the full board. So I'm comfortable with it, so
Thank
thank
you.
you.
Thank you. All right, I'll take it to the public, open it up for public hearing. Any questions or comments on this item from the public? No? Okay, I'll bring it back to the board and I will entertain a motion then for this item, please.
I'll make a motion that the board adopt the fiscal year budget and appropriations limit, resolution number 12-2026.
And then approving the cost.
Which includes the 3.68 cost of living adjustment and equity adjustments for 2.5% for the 5 classification and 5% for 1 classification.
Perfect, thank you. All right, do I have a second?
I'll second.
Great, thank you. Roll call, please.
Directors Tyrone. Aye. Mortensen.
Aye.
Logan.
Aye.
Peterson.
Yes.
And Fardonish.
Aye. Perfect. Motion passes 5-0. All right. Let's go into our discussion item, utility connection. This is, we will hold a discussion on the policy requiring a separate utility connection for multi-family homes and ADUs. Is that, engineer, okay, Maria Z? Okay, go for it, please.
Good evening again. Lori Zine, District Engineer. Jeff and I can both speak to different aspects of this subject, but recently has come to the attention of staff that various property owners in the district have been asking for what we would call a variance to our requirement for separate utility connections, specifically for multifamily projects and low income projects and accessory dwelling units. And so I brought some of that information and attached some of the letters to this staff report for our discussion tonight. And also included some of the code that has directed the way that we've approached our connections in the past. So for the past approximately 19 years, if any residential project has gone forward within the district, every dwelling unit has been required to have a separate meter. So that has been pretty consistent for the last 19 years. And that includes some of the low income housing that has come through Templeton, including Rolling Hills 2 and a senior low income housing project called Templeton Place 2 that's off of Peterson Ranch Road. So in 2025, there was a law that was passed at the state level, state code level, exempting low income housing or greater than 90% low income housing from this meter per dwelling unit requirement. And so that new law has been brought to our attention by one of the developers in town, People Self-Help Housing, who have a project called Rolling Hills 3. That's an additional, I believe it's 28 units. And so so as far as the multifamily goes, they're asking to reduce the number of meters because the cost of putting all the meters in and also the plumbing beyond the meters, which would be borne by them in their project, is quite a bit higher than if they could reduce those meters as allowed by that state law and only have, reduce the plumbing to each unit. So, and they might have more to add. They're actually present with us online tonight, various folks. And so when consulting with legal, which Jeff might want to jump in here, we've been told that our local code, our TCSC code, can override that state code if we wish. But as you look at our code at the first portions that I've included, there actually is some opening for us to allow there to be a master meter kind of concept. So there's in the section 14.08.080, service to multiple units on same or adjoining premises. We have kind of two separate situations where we can require separate service connections to each and any unit or structure. Or so that's item 1, and then or item 2 through one or more service connections or meters which supply the entire premises or lots. Each separate premises shall be provided with a sub-meter unless the district elects otherwise. So our code actually gives district staff and the board an option to allow for this more what we call master meter scenario. And in the staff report, I do line out some of the developments that preceded 19 years ago, where we actually do have master meters on some of the older apartment complexes and mobile home parks and larger developments. But the state code actually that was brought to our attention by People Self-Help Housing, did require, that each of, like in a non-low income housing situation, that each unit be metered. So either they have a master meter with sub meters, or each unit be metered. And that came down from the state. And so that's what we've been also adhering to in our own codes these past kind of 19 years or so. So, on the other hand, we're also looking at discussing ADUs tonight. And there has been, if you look at the ADU code, in the code section 1408.560, which is on page 2 of the staff report under the ADU item, it says for secondary dwelling units that does not meet the requirements of, and I put ADU conversion, the district may require a new or separate service connection between the secondary dwelling and the district, subject to payment of hookup fees. So that language actually says may, but in practice, we have been requiring separate connections to the main lines for both water and sewer for separate or detached ADUs since this code has been in place. And so that's, there are a couple of people who have questioned that, and the reason why they've been questioning it is that, extra cost to tie into the roadway, obviously, is significant, rather than sharing these connections within an existing lateral, if it's technically possible. TCSD or Templeton does differ from our neighbors in this requirement, and most of the cities and basically, we're unique within the county for requiring the separate connection. And so, our neighbors, the Tasco and City of Paso Robles, do allow shared connections for ADUs. So that's been brought up a lot when I discuss this with developers. And then just, various plots and based on technical difficulty. So that within that report, some folks that live on 1220 Templeton Hills Road have a somewhat difficult connection, and they were saying that their 2 connections to the main lines would cost about $50,000, whereas if they shared the connections, it would be like $5,000. So, and they're saying that's cost prohibitive for the project. So, I also heard, spoke with another contractor today who was telling me just a simple water connection, which wasn't that difficult, would be about $14,000, whereas a shared connection would be about. So, so that's something that we are open to discuss and take direction from the board on, and take questions on. I know there's a couple people here that might want to speak to it from the public and from these projects. So,
Thank you. Thanks for bringing this to our.
The only thing I would want to add is we've been consistently requiring separate connections since the ADU law, for about the past 7 or 8 years when ADUs kind of came about. What we found though is even though we may have required it, like say in a will serve letter, it doesn't necessarily mean that the county ensured that the plans reflected that connection, or final the building without necessarily requiring the separate connection. So we have instances where ADUs have, even though we've documented the request or the requirement of separating it, where ADUs have been built and finalized and allowed to occupy without doing so. So we have this handful of out of compliance ADUs. So I don't want to bog that down, but think about that. We have an issue with enforceability, at least relying on the county's building inspection process to enforce this component. And there also have been a couple of cases where we've had some exceptions where there really were utility conflicts that made separate connections not viable.
One question I have is that if we do a master meter, currently, since all of them are separate meters, we could add a shut off, we add a shut off valve. So each unit, if something happens to a unit, you could easily shut that off. If we go to this master meter idea, can we still require for the developers to put in a shut off valve for each unit? So that way, I mean, I think it's just it's a good idea to be able to have this shut off for each unit instead of being able, having to shut off the water to the whole building. And that could cause a little bit of problem for TCSD.
So on the water side, it would be, if it's behind the master meter, it'd be up to, I mean, we could request it, but it's beyond our control. We would only be able to shut off the water at the meter. So it'd be up to the property manager or the apartment complex owner or whatever we're speaking of, to actually be able to shut off an individual unit.
Okay.
But it makes sense
We won't be-
from the perspective of isolating, like say they had a leak, they wouldn't want to shut off water to,
the whole-
let's say, a building that serves 20 units if they're trying to fix a leak that's in one. So, it seems like it'd be smart to be able to put
Okay.
shut off isolate the
Yeah, maybe,
unit.
maybe
But I'm not-
hopefully the public could address that, I guess I'd see what their standard is for that. And then the other one is, for charging monthly fees, are we still going to be able to charge separate monthly, baseline fee for each unit? Or would that all have to be just on one account?
So we do, the fee structure set up so that again, because we have older, let's speak to apartments for just a moment. We have older
I know.
duplexes and triplexes that have multiple units assigned to 1 meter. We do charge 2 or 3 in those cases, or however many units there are base rates. And then the tiers are essentially multiplied. So if the normal tier kicked in, let's say at 5 units to tier 2, and there were 3 units on this 1 meter, they would be charged at 15 units. So the billing system is already set up to handle multiple units served by 1 meter. And we do have the same circumstances with ADUs in those rare cases where we have multiple units tied to a single water service.
Okay.
And on the sewer side, for residential, it's pretty straightforward, it's per dwelling unit.
And so same thing with the multi-family units.
Same thing with multifamily.
So that would, each unit would be its own.
Well, each unit wouldn't have its own bill. There'd be one bill per meter. The bills are not broken out. There's just,
Also one
in
bill.
those cases, yes, in those cases, only the account holder receives the bill.
I see, okay, all right. Any other questions? All right, okay, I'll go aheid, open it up to public. If anybody would like to make a comment, please go to the podium, introduce yourself and.
Hi, how you doing? Marty Mohammed, Central Coast Project Planning. We specialize in ADUs for clients throughout the county of San Luis Obispo, specifically in other parts of the state. And like staff had noted, they did a great job with their information on there. Any of the other areas in this county don't require individual laterals. They allow for branch connections, which is typical in ADU. It's substantially cheaper in that regard, assuming obviously the plumbing calcs and so forth work. And we often prove that all the time when we work with the different jurisdictions. So we would support any kind of variance that would allow for that specific to ADUs. The one that we are specifically working on is less than 500 square feet, which is a 1-bedroom, 1-bath. So it'd be no different than essentially something adding an addition to a home, but that's not required to have its own lateral. An ADU that's converted into garage is also not required to have its own lateral. So really it's no different. So to substitute one out versus the other really doesn't make much sense. And on the sewer side, like we're talking about from a usage standpoint, billings are charged based on obviously having a separate bill for meters, but internally it could be sub-metered if somebody cared to divvy out the water between tenants. Many of the ADUs we find are primarily for family members. It's not costly anymore it doesn't make sense anymore to build a single family home because essentially you're upside down the minute you finish that home. You really are. So there's no profit to gain from that. So essentially they're just trying to provide housing on land that they already own. So in our perspective, this individual client, you're talking about a $5,000 cost. It was actually more than the number that she had indicated in agenda there, it was actually $60,000 to do the water and sewer together to separate those individually. So that's about 15% of the budget. When you're talking about a $400,000 or $500,000 cost, it's a big number. So financially, to obviously qualify is obviously hard in that regard, and then to add that on top of that makes it even more. So any variance that obviously is talked about, we'd ask that ADUs be included in that and allow for that. We open the discussion. We'd be glad to communicate and help out staff in any regard with information needed. So happy to do so. Appreciate it. Thank you.
Well, thank you for your comment. Appreciate that. Any other comments? Does people self-housing, do they have a comment? At least would they know, I guess.
Hi.
Oh, there we go. Go ahead.
Sorry. Hi, sorry. Can you hear me? I'm on the Zoom call.
Yes.
I'm Daisy Miguel. I'm one of the associate directors with People Self-Help Housing. Just wanted to provide a quick comment on Rolling Hills 3, which is the development that's being discussed for the master meter option. We are providing 28 units of affordable housing. The units have to remain affordable for the next 55 years. We own the property for the next 55 years. There is a substantial cost increase for having to do individual meters, which is why we are requesting that the project be considered for 4 master meters. There's also an additional cost to the project in the terms of tenants have to pay less rent because they receive a utility allowance for having to pay for their individual meter. So for the overall health of the project, it would be best if we would be able to be allowed to do the 4 master meters instead of the individual meters.
And then do you know how you guys are going to handle the shutoff valve for each unit?
My understanding is that we do have a shutoff valve for both the individual building as well as the individual units.
Okay, good, perfect, thank you. All right, any other questions, comments? We don't say anything, carry on. Okay, I'll bring it back to the board for the discussion. What do you guys think? So this has been going on a while, so I know we kind of talked about this a little bit before, like a couple of years ago, but we really never discussed it in length and everything. So just, hopefully we could give staff a direction today.
I do think it's odd that our policy seems to be in conflict or different than our surrounding and neighbors. And if we are dependent upon the county for enforcement, then it seems a little odd that we would have different requirements, potentially stricter requirements for metering than the county does. I know that, Lorraine, your report, you had talked about that it might be easier for having multiple meters might be easier for staff to be able to notice if there's an issue with a leak or something, being able to be more responsive more quickly to a potential issue like that. But hadn't we also discussed in previous meetings, Justin, that some of the, I forget the name of the new software that you guys are using and the new metering should be able to like already enable better monitoring and notification of a possible leak?
Perhaps that was GIS.
Yeah.
Infrastructure. I don't know necessarily that it would have those sorts of capabilities lent to those, but to our neighboring agencies, they're having success. And I haven't dug into if that is still requiring some sort of shutoff valve that's accessible in some sort of a vault. Let's say like a meter box sort of, but it doesn't have a meter necessarily in it, but it has that connection where you could shut off the second dwelling, the accessory dwelling unit. I'm not sure what sorts of, how we can get creative and still provide sort of safety measures for that second unit. But for instance, and mentioned in the staff report, Atascadero Mutual Water Company is having success and for a number of years.
Yeah, I think the issues that have come before the board before really dealt with was the district's policy of requiring separate connections legal or not? And you were advised that yes, it was defensive and legal. And then there was some discussion about, particularly on the sewer side, some of the potential conflicts that can exist when you share a lateral. Like, let's say, if you have a primary home and an ADU on the same lot with a shared lateral, one of the users might cause a blockage in the lateral, which might actually cause the sewage to come up in the neighboring property. And if the blockage occurs beyond where the two homes meet in the lateral, then the sewer backup could occur in the house that didn't necessarily cause that problem. So those were some of the reasons that I think were discussed several years ago about the advantages of having separate connections, and it would be easier to identify them. But then again, it's true, I think, that our requirements are a little unusual, a little more onerous, and certainly more costly. And so does the benefits, I'm speaking specifically to the ADU thing, at least with this comment, outweigh the con of the additional cost? The benefits outweigh the con. And then when it comes to these requirements of separate meters, I think for multifamily housing, I think we're really speaking of just affordable housing projects. Other multifamily housing would still be required to have individually metered units. That's by state law. They don't have to be district meters, but they would still need to be metered. And so most of the cost savings that People's Self-Help is speaking of is probably not particularly applicable in those cases. They're entitled under state law anyway they're not required to have separately metered units by state law. Again, as another factor to make the project more affordable.
And then with the ADUs, if we do have them connect, share the same utilities, if they do, like say if they put a bigger ADU, like 1,200 square feet, and then if later on they decide to go ahead and split a lot, at that point we could require them to go, disconnect and then go straight to our infrastructure, right?
Yes.
We will put that in our ordinance basically, or they have to agree to it.
The ordinance already contains that language.
Yes.
In other words, each parcel has to have its own independent service. So that's sort of a standalone thing that's existed long before the ADUs have come about, and would remain. But yes, so I guess I think that's addressed in the staff report, that if a property owner we're considering ADU, but then also considering at some point in the future splitting the lot, it might make more sense to just do it with separate connections initially rather than come back and do it. But we don't know when that might occur, and I don't think the district would be prohibiting if you wish to relax these rules. I'll use the word relax these requirements. It wouldn't necessarily prohibit. We wouldn't require shared connections. The property owner can decide whether they wanted individual connections or a shared connection.
Yeah.
I think most of them would end up being shared connections going forward. And then I guess the final, so that's really the issue. And my recommendation, if you again wish to consider relaxing the rules, I'm okay with the direction of, okay, let's begin looking at how this works, and we can move forward with the projects we're talking about now. But I would recommend that you in the near future amend the code to eliminate the discretion of staff. So it's clear that a separate connection is not required, but is available. Instead of the way it reads now is it's like there's discretion that staff can decide whether a separate connection is allowed or not. And I guess by practice, we've not allowed these. I mean, the practices, we've not allowed them. And so I don't want to, we'll just change that practice by, some staff determination, because it's established, and those that have come before have been required to deal with this higher standard.
And then you mentioned if there is for the ADU case, if there is a sewage blockage in one, it would affect the other property. Well, that's not really a TCSD problem, right? That would be the property owner that they need to notify.
when a sewage backup occurs, it's everybody's problem, but, yes, if the blockage was in the lateral, it's up to the property owner then to get a plumber out there or somebody to clear the
Yeah.
the
that's-
blockage.
They need to notify their tenants, hey, yeah, that there's this connection, so, okay.
Yeah, I guess my concern is that, if we've got a practice or a policy that's not enforceable by the county, then it's really kind of a pointless policy. And given the fact that, we are unique in that we're not really consistent with our neighboring cities, it seems as though we do need to make a change. And then also for affordable housing, since that is an issue in California, it seems that we should be doing whatever we can to make affordable housing more reasonable in terms of building costs, so that can proceed. So I'm in favor of making some changes to the policy, and also so that it's consistent, so that it's not up to staff to determine, as you mentioned, when is the policy applying, when is it not? So I think adding some clarity around that. So I would support making some changes.
I'm in favor of making changes.
Okay, all right then, so, you want to?
Yeah, I think so, because we have some folks, I think, are making decisions now that about how to proceed, and staff, we need to know how we're gonna work with the projects going forward. Is it sufficient to say that we've been given direction to interpret the policies with a more relaxed eye and permit for qualifying multifamily projects, and in this case, I don't see a timeshare coming to Templeton, at least in the near future, could be wrong. But if a project qualifies under state law, that we would allow for master meters, again, that's for multifamily housing, and for ADUs, we will permit shared connections, and that we will cease enforcement actions on ADUs that have been recently constructed that aren't technically in compliance with the district's issued requirement as in regards to separate connections. And then further, that we work with legal counsel to draft ordinance change for your future considerations that would codify this and make it clearer to anyone who would be reading the district's codes about what the policy or what the requirements are. Finally, I do want to confirm with our legal team, we've studied this, we've reviewed our fee study from 2018, as well as the rate study, and we believe this is essentially cost neutral to the district. But I want to ensure that before you ultimately codify any code changes. So that's what if that's what
I'll make that motion. Do I have a second?
I'll second the motion.
All right, roll call, please. We made our job easier, actually.
So Directors Hardonish,
Aye.
Logan,
Aye.
Mortensen,
Stand.
Peterson,
Yes.
Okay, motion passes 4 with 1 abstain. 4, with 1 abstain, okay. Good. Thank you, well, thank you everyone for making your comments on this item. All right, CSD Board of Directors election. Do we have Scott make a presentation on that?
Sure, this is the item that you've been most concerned about. Because we're so well represented already. So as you know, we have multiple seats that represent our area, CSDA. And seat C is up for election now. There are 4 candidates running, including the current incumbent, Vince Ferrante. And this item is an opportunity for you to direct us as to which of the candidates for the CSDA seat you wish us to cast a vote for.
Well, Vince, he's been coming to the meetings, even though he's in Monterey, he's been coming, he's been involved, and he's obviously the incumbent, so I mean, I think it would be good to keep him, but because he's running, I was surprised, but I don't know what the other board members feel.
I think it's probably sometimes good to make changes.
That's true.
You know, just to get different perspectives and, different viewpoints. I know that Vincent has been very active. He included his photo in his bio, which is like, I recognize the face more than the name. But, you know, he's been doing it for so many years. I'm just wondering if it's just a good idea to make some changes.
I just don't know any of the other people, that's the problem.
Oh, so that's the problem?
It's like, who are we voting for?
Yeah.
I have no idea.
I was leaning towards Bergstoff. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing his last name, or the Ojai Valley Sanitation or Sanitary District. Phil's district incorrectly. Just to, I don't know. But, you know, I don't have any real strong feelings about it one way or another. But I just think that sometimes it's just good to get.
Yeah, no, I understand. I just,
Blood.
yeah, I understand. I don't know what the new blood is. So that's.
We'll find out.
Do any of the other, so you said you don't have any preference, you guys know any of the other?
I have not met any of you.
Do you know?
I don't believe I've met anyone other than Vincent, and I have met him on several occasions at our
Yes. Yeah.
chapter meetings.
Yeah.
I would recommend you take any comments from the public, and somebody in the audience does have a CSDA hat on.
I didn't know.
Should be some bias there.
That was something on purpose. Yes,
Yeah.
please.
I didn't come here really for that, but I was just had an appointment in town, and so I thought I would come. Scott Duffield, for those of you who don't know me, I'm a Templeton resident and also on the CSDA board, as you guys know, from I work at Heritage Ranch, CSD and general manager role right now, and I've been on the board for a couple of years. I know Vince very well, obviously. He's in the coastal network. There's 3 representatives in each network. So it's Vince up in the north, and then me here in the central coast, and then central part of the network, and then Elaine Magner is in the south. Those other 2, so I know Vince, and I know Jackie. I know of her. She's on one of the committees through CSDA. At least she's involved in that, and she has a lot of experience. The other 2 are very new, and I don't know them either. So I think one of them's only been a director for a year, I want to say, if I read that right, and the other one's been maybe 1 term. But that's about all I know. So it's hard even for us, even for me, as in my involvement in CSD. I have to do the same thing for my district. It's you guys do what you like, and Vince is been around a long time and a big supporter of CSDA.
And he's
And
still
the-
active, that, yeah. I
And the
mean,
coastal network, but he is getting on, he's, you know,
Yes.
80 something.
Yeah.
He's like 83 years old, believe it or not.
and this is a 4-year term, right? Or is it
3 year.
3 years?
3 year term. It's interesting too, because some of these people still have to run for their home districts.
Yeah.
And so, you know, that's dependent upon being the CSDA director, if you're a director in your home district still, so.
Yeah, so
Some things
it
could
would
still-
become vacant. It could become vacant
Yeah.
before the 3 years if the person no longer represented a
And then
district.
we'd be back doing this again.
Yes, you would. Yes, you would. And you'll be doing it every year either way, because it's on a rotating schedule. You might have to do it more than once in a year.
Thank you.
Thank you, Scott.
Thanks for just passing by.
Perfect, yeah, perfect, you were here. Okay. All right, so we're down to 2 maybe. Vincent and.
Yeah, Perry I would throw out.
Yeah.
Perry I would throw out, because they've only been in the position, serving the district for 3 years.
Right.
But wasn't Scott only? Wasn't he also? Oh, it was like 18 months.
Well, he's, it says,
Length of service. with
as
the
a
district.
general manager.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
But before that,
Where then he's got a number of different, I think, roles. He's, And he says here that he does regularly attend the Ventura County chapters of CSDA. American Public Works Association, Ventura County Executive Board.
Looks like he's been in the area for a while in public
Yeah.
agencies, but
Yeah.
maybe only with the district for 18 months. Or with Ohio Valley Sanitary District for that thing.
We have, there's one seat available, we can vote for one person?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't have strong preferences, so.
I don't have the strong preference either way, but I just think it's probably good to make a
Yeah.
change, just to change it up.
Don't know. Just don't know who we change it.
And since Scott didn't
Because I mean, I.
listen any direction.
It's hard to say if they, I mean, like with Vincent, he makes the effort to go to our, local chapter meetings, which is really nice, he comes from Monterey and he typically does a little bit of, presentation in terms of what's going on.
I'm okay with either way. I mean,
Okay, I'll make a motion to, vote for Vincent. Do I have a second, and we'll see what happens?
I'll second.
Okay, all right, can I have a roll call, please?
Directors Fardonish,
Aye.
Mortensen,
Aye.
Logan,
I,
Peterson,
Yes.
and Tyrone.
Yes.
All right, motion passes 5-0. Great, thank you. Next item. There we go. General manager report.
Yeah, just a few items that I wanted to, or a few items related to the 4th of July and our enforcement education that I wanted to make sure you were aware of. We do have multiple signs that we expect to have up in the community this week, announcing the sort of zero tolerance policy for illegal fireworks. We are coordinating with Sheriff's Office for actual enforcement on the 4th and expect, not promise, but expect to have a deputy assigned to Templeton that can work hand in hand with one of our fire personnel to deal with hands-on enforcement. Again, we are concerned about altercations with a firefighter and fireworks users. The fireworks are often accompanied by heavy alcohol use and other issues. And so that's a concern. We will have one person not assigned to an engine, just assigned to enforcement of illegal fireworks that evening. We are also on the schedule to have aerial surveillance. Again, this is through a company called Overwatch. This is an airplane surveillance right now that's anticipated to be on July 3rd. It may be moved to July 4th if the forecast for July 3rd in some other communities that are essentially higher on their list, longer customers, appear to be fogged in on the 4th. Then they'll move our date from the 3rd to the 4th, since we know we anticipate having more violations on the 4th. But Templeton's not immune on the 3rd. Leading up to the 4th of July, there are aerial fireworks, and we believe that this year, 3rd might be it's a Friday night, and so could be kind of a late night. And last year, we certainly had aerial fireworks going off in the days preceding the 4th of July. So additionally, the booths will all have large, like 8x8 signs at both sides of each booth, indicating zero tolerance for illegal fireworks. We've been working with TNT to get the signs made, and again, our crews will be putting them up the next couple of days.
What are they gonna do at the park?
I have no idea.
We haven't got confirmation about it being fenced off.
I do not believe it'll be fenced off. The park has been rented by the Chamber of Commerce for the day. So I
Is our assigned hypothetical deputy going to be patrolling the park area or general?
I think really with wherever we help identify as the problematic location. But I think we heard previously that the sheriff's office and the park rangers felt like the park was probably gonna be very difficult to tackle. If the crowd is like it's been in years past, where we've had hundreds and hundreds of fireworks or evening participants.
Are we putting up signs around the park? No.
I'm not, it's not our facility. like we don't have. We'd have to do that in cooperation with the county. If the park is your biggest concern, we can put our efforts there. But, we were focusing on illegal fireworks, which can occur kind of all over town.
I mean, I think park was one of our bigger
Yeah.
concerns, so.
Yeah, I think the park does
So-
need to have some signage, and I
Yeah.
would say beginning July first,
Yeah.
which is concerts in the park. Because I think as soon as concerts in the park is over with, people will probably start setting up in the park for the 4th of July.
Well, I mean, to be honest, if we did put up the sign, it's like if the county wants to take it down, let them take it down. and
Yeah,
then
we are
put
putting
it
up a sign right here on our property. Again, that's not district property.
Yeah, I know, but
But I think we should work with the county to have signs put up, since the county's ordinance says
yeah,
that there's no fireworks prohibited. And given that we're selling fireworks here, we're kind of contributing to that. So we should be working with the county, in my opinion, to have some signage so people know. I know that there was something that Captain Walls had posted on Facebook that kind of gave notice that there was our new ordinance regarding fireworks. And there was some pushback from some people. It was like, well, where can we put, and what do you mean you can't do it in the park? And where are we supposed to do it now? So I think that we need to take every precaution and try and kind of nip this in the bud, because over the years, it has gotten crazier here on the 4th of July.
so maybe, yeah, if contact the park ranger.
Yeah, we'll put signs up. I'm really.
There's already a program that the county is providing for other facilities
Yeah.
the county has. It's just to ask for additional
Signage.
advertising signage that we could have here at the park.
Yeah.
Just as we do for dogs during the Wednesday.
Yeah, those we put up because we rent the park from the county on the concerts of the park day. So we put those up before the concert and we remove them at the end of the concert night. That's, so I saw it last week, but that's what we've done.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I
but
think we should do
since-
everything possible to help the
since-
sheriffs, who's gonna be really stretched thin on 4th of July. So anything we can do to try and contain it, and many of the people that I think go to the park are not residents of Templeton. So I think that's an issue too, so I think that there needs to be some signage out there.
I've started to hear, like, receive questions about our policy and some of the nuances about, like, what about our sidewalks or our driveway? Where
So
are we directing?
we issued a press release today and it's on the cover page of the district's website.
Okay.
And there we created a sort of fireworks summary page that's specific to, and yes, a driveway, you can light safe and sane fireworks on a drive, that's private property. As long as it's like a home driveway, not a commercial.
What about
business.
sidewalks?
Sidewalks, no, if it's in the public right of way, it's not permissible under our.
Okay. and
If it's
so-
a sidewalk from your driveway to your front door, we can like, well, safe and sane.
And then
Or a shared driveway.
if we have, like, where should we direct people to ask their questions? People who are like wanting to respect the policy. I don't want to be the.
So
Where do I
again,
direct?
there's a little listing on the fire department's webpage that says safe and sane fireworks. It's also available on the homepage, the district, if you just go to templetoncsd.org, there's a.
In the
it's
quick
a-
links
it's-
at the
Yeah.
bottom, and it also lists out like specific locations where you cannot light them off, so that kind of helps give a list of, you know.
Have you guys gotten any questions, like received any in the office, like? are people-
Not that I've heard, and if we do get questions about fireworks, we direct them over to
Okay.
Thomas, who is on the press release. His email and contact information is who was listed on there to be in contact for it, but I can direct people would be over to them.
So I would also recommend putting something on Templeton Proud as well.
Yeah, we did, we put a link to the webpage just last week,
Okay, good.
but I mean, that may be buried. in
And
there.
then the thing that the fire department put out with the new regulations that got shared on as well. So they put it on their page and I think maybe the.
And we haven't put anything in the utility bills recently.
I don't.
We don't have time to do that prior to this worth doing?
No, they may not be received until about the first or second. We have an announcement already going out on the. We can put a message on the utility bill on the, it's not, it's obvious it's a flyer, but.
Yeah, I think a flyer is more effective, because I don't think people read that little message. I think to really have an impact, because this is a big change, it's gotta be a flyer.
Times where it's the utility email contacts and the park.
We don't have a flyer worked up right now. I mean,
And anything on the office, windows or at the counter? About fireworks? The change?
so there's, the fireworks rules are all, we've provided all of the booth sellers a QR code, that's what's called, right? That goes directly to the district's website where these rules are labeled. So everywhere you can legally buy a Safe and Sane firework will have the QR code to the district's rules. So they can just open it up with their phone. That's something one of the fireworks booth sellers requested.
I'm gonna go to public for a second. Go ahead, you have a question?
Have a recommendation. When you read that ordinance, it says where fireworks may be used, and the bulleted list is kind of under that heading, and it makes it read like you can use them on these places. So you have to really read the subheading to say that the bulleted list is exclusions.
I see.
Or if you just read the heading and look at the list, the first thing says streets and sidewalks and blah, 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 blah. That's meant to be
Oh, yeah.
where it's excluded. And I understand, you have to read it, but if you're just looking at it.
Where is that? Which
So that
part?
needs to be changed.
So it says where Safe and Sane fireworks may be used, new regulation, and then there's a paragraph there, but then there's a sentence that says fireworks are prohibited in, but it's kind of confusing because the bulleted items. Mhm.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Any other comments from public?
I had a question. So did you say that there's one deputy, a sheriff's deputy who's assigned to enforcement? Is that right?
No, so we've been told to expect one deputy that can work with our assigned firefighter hand in hand for enforcement in Templeton.
If they're not needed somewhere else, an emergency. Correct.
Yes, can be called away at any time. The sheriff's office has been really clear that other calls can take priority over fireworks enforcement, or will take priority over fireworks enforcement.
And what I've been reading from people's comments online is things like one of the differences this year is that the officer doesn't have to see the illegal use. It just needs to be reported with video evidence or something like that. Is that accurate?
So the county has their own administrative citation program that ours is kind of mimicked. And it's my understanding that yes, the standards for issuance of an administrative citation are somewhat lower than a criminal misdemeanor. And so that may mean that should the county or should have some sort of evidence such as from a drone or from aerial photography that can pinpoint the location of illegal fireworks, they can be issued a violation from either the county or if we're the ones who witness it, or it's our contractor that obtains that information from the district. So in Templeton, a property owner or a violator is subject to enforcement from the county or from Templeton CSD.
Well, I think what people's worry is that in the past, say your neighbor is shooting off mortars, which is illegal, and you call it in, and by the time the officer gets there, it's done and over with. They can't verify that it actually happened at that location by that person. And so nothing ever happens, and there's no real way to enforce it. And there's an impression that that's changed now, and that the officer doesn't need to actually see the infraction happening. It could be reported by a neighbor, for instance, is what the people's impression is.
Well, I mean, from the perspective of discouraging fireworks, I'm not sure that's a bad thing if folks believe that there
Oh,
is a
correct.
heightened level of enforcement. We will have to go through this process to determine which administrative citations can stand up to the scrutiny required. So the county last year issued a number of citations, none in Templeton, but countywide. And they reported that many of the administrative citations that were administered were appealed, and then they were not able to withstand the administrative process. And so I think each circumstance is gonna have to stand on its own. I couldn't tell you that everyone who has a neighbor or a reported call is gonna warrant an actual administrative violation. So, I also don't believe that every violation every illegal firework needs to receive a citation in order for the citation program to be effective. If we can get some violations, right? Not every speeder gets a ticket, right? But hopefully there's enough that cause the majority of folks to obey the law.
Well, I think the videoing is not a bad idea because look what happened.
I would recommend, I'm happy to answer questions, but the board can't make any substantive discussion on the topic. It's not technically listed on the agenda. I wanted to report out kind of what our plan is, and we will get some clarification on the recently issued press release and work on getting signage at the park.
Okay. Any other questions? All right. Bring it back. Are you done with your report?
I am.
Okay, great. Thank you. Activity update reports. We have engineering. Any questions on that? Public, any questions on the engineering report? Finance, any questions on that? No. Public?
Oh, wait.
anything? Oh.
I'm so sorry, think about the engineer. I did have one question. Oh, Lori, that's fine. My question was, for Evers Park, she wrote that the permit was extended until 12/31/2026, which is the last extension allowed. Because of the back and forth with the county, do we think that
That doesn't mean that the park has to be complete, the
Yeah,
thing has to be completed by then.
But it has to be
permits to be pulled
we have
by
to do
then.
it again? Okay.
No, we may have to resubmit for a newer version of the building code if we were to delay moving forward with the project.
Okay.
I mean, permits, the review is for anything, like say you went to do a remodel in your house and you submitted plans, you got them approved, but you held off.
Yeah.
If you wait too long, you've got to basically resubmit and ensure that the code hasn't changed.
But do we think that we're gonna butt up against that at all?
I think we're okay for now. Depends how fast we can move forward.
That was my only question, sorry.
We did finance, and then fire and emergency services. I have a quick question. 716 that's cheap truck, right?
No,
7160,
that is the Type 3 engine.
Oh, okay, and it hasn't been fixed?
I'm sorry, what?
Oh, the electrical issue with siren control.
Yeah, no, it's been fixed.
It's been fixed. Okay. All right. Any other questions for fire, public fire? Parks and rec, solid waste. First I wanted to mention that, was it this one, right? Okay, first we got the grant. Okay, so the grants that we got, one for water bottle fill station. So that's good. So that we're gonna put that in all of our parks.
Yeah,
We're working on it.
German.
we are.
Oh, that's great. And then you got the for the,
So TRF got the
turf.
other one.
yeah, the TRF got the turf. Well, okay.
Like
so
a field leveler.
Is that what lover?
Yeah.
Okay, and they're gonna let us have it, to use it?
Yeah, they applied for the grant, but the equipment's being donated to the district.
Okay, alright. And I can't remember, was this?
So
Yeah,
I
yeah.
think the total cost was like $20-something thousand, and TRF paid the additional cost for the turf renovator. So they received a grant for 12,000,
Yes.
but that wasn't enough for the actual the entire
Okay.
piece of machinery.
Uh-huh.
And so they did half and half, and
Okay, we paid half of it.
TRF did.
Okay, TCSD pay, okay, alright,
Yeah, TRF applied for the grant through Justin and received the grant
okay,
and then is covering the gap.
I see.
costs, is that right?
Yes, yes. And then,
Oh, I see.
yeah, so TRF
Oh.
is covering the gap
Oh,
themselves.
the-
Yes.
oh, wow.
And then it's,
That's nice.
it's being, do you know, Justin, if it'll be here next week?
Yeah, supposedly it's supposed to be delivered, possibly by the end of this week, but next week for sure.
And then where does it get stored?
So it's, my understanding it's gonna be delivered to the wastewater treatment plant.
Okay.
And so then stored at the facility
That makes
out
sense.
there, yeah. It would be used, it's, I don't wanna say it's a rather invasive piece of machinery, but it does level fields. And so then there's a certain time of year to be using that type of equipment. And City of Paso Robles, they found success in springtime using those types of, that type of equipment. So we'll have to fit that into our schedules and our youth sports programs and use in the fields. So.
Perfect. And public, any questions? It's okay. Next was, utilities. Oh yeah, this is where the report. So we hired Eric Jackson,
Yeah, that's right.
Parks Maintenance. Awesome. How's it going?
Well,
He's
yeah,
still here?
6 gophers in the first week, so.
All right.
Six gophers in the first week, so happy to report. Yeah,
Where?
at German. Yeah,
Thank you.
we're back up to setting 30 of those gopher hawks, those traps for gophers, 30 a day with the help of Eric Jackson. So we're happy to have him on board. Yeah.
And then I also want to mention that I like to see that method demonstrating water valve replacement technique. That we don't have to shut off customers' water. That's really neat.
It really is. I mean, it's amazing how this technology and utilities constantly changes. And so it's fun to keep up to date and be exposed to these sorts of things. I appreciate our neighbors inviting us to that and having our staff experience that.
Then, is this the engineer? No. And your utility, so I'm a bit confused. So I know you guys had a meeting with the water board regarding the permitting.
Yeah.
And then you said one of the main issues is to revise the point of compliance and where you're supposed to take the water. So I guess I'm confused. I thought where they want us to now take the water samples is at a better location. We're gonna get more favorable results. So why would you want to change it?
It is confusing. So they did move the point of compliance to groundwater, and that was
So that's good, right?
headed in the right direction. During this permit process, we had, they moved the point of compliance to a groundwater monitoring station that's located right on the Selby premises. Okay, and so we have gone back through our reports and past documents, going back a couple of decades, and found that our down gradient well that we were sampling from wasn't on the premises of Selby at all, but rather was the potable drinking water well Smith. Okay, and that's how it's listed in our permit in 2007 is to sample the down gradient well, Smith well,
Okay.
as in a way as our point of compliance. So you're right, through the process and the draft permit, we moved to groundwater sampling instead of effluent as our point of compliance. Now we're working out, instead of sampling ground monitoring well 3 right on the premises of Selby, moving that point of compliance, I think it's just above 8,000 linear feet to the north to the Smith well.
So that would be something that you think they may,
Water quality is better.
they may do that.
Yes, they gave us some indication that they would be,
Okay,
they're considering that request.
and then, but they're keeping the 500 TDS.
Well, we've made a request to adjust that as well, and I think we're less confident that there will be some movement there in the short term, but nonetheless, they took it under consideration.
So what's the TDS at the other well site right now? Do you know?
At monitoring well 3 or at Smith? At
Smith.
monitor,
At
okay, Smith is, at any time, it's around 700.
So it's still above.
Well, good point. So we were requesting to shift back to an earlier draft of the permit where we had a TDS limitation of 730 milligrams per liter. And that was consistent with the basin plan, and that was consistent with the 2020 general permit. And so we're asking to shift back to that.
Thank you. All right, any other questions on the utilities? Public, any questions? Yeah. Wonderful, thank you. Okay, that's it. I'll bring it back to for directors' reports or comments. Any meetings, anything that you guys were involved on behalf of the district that you want to share?
I've just been, now that I'm a part of TRF, we've had a couple of TRF meetings, planning the annual beer run.
Nice.
If you want to volunteer, anybody, let me know, or if you want to sign up, please sign up.
Okay. Yeah, I'm gonna be there. Actually, we'll stop doing that then, so.
Yeah, I'll be there as a volunteer.
As a
Not a runner.
I'm here, maybe drinking here.
Yeah.
Oh, that, but
That-
legitimately, not the way you make it sound.
No, actually, banning,
That might be a little.
banning the law.
Yeah.
Okay, wonderful. All right, that's it. Well, thank you. Meeting adjourned.